Welcome to another edition of the Syncom Smalltalk tutorial series. This morning we'd like to take a look at the modeling tool in ObjectStudio, and this is an ObjectStudio specific tool, although you can use the results either in ObjectStudio or VisualWorks because it's going to end up generating code that matches the modeling results you've worked on that side of things. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and close this down and take a look at what we're doing. What I've got here is I've got a little package and I've got a little class, and the idea here is, let's say you started work on some application and you decided that instead of just fleshing this all out in code, which admittedly is largely the Smalltalk way, you decided you'd rather go ahead and work with a business analyst and go ahead and use some modeling. Well, I've already loaded the modeling tool because I didn't see a reason to have you watch all of this, but if you go to load application, you want to load this guy and you notice it's already loaded. And once it's in here, you just double click on the modeling tool. You'll get this interface coming up. Now you could either open an existing model if you've already been doing work, or in this case I'm going to create a new model, and you probably just want to for now leave this with the default. You notice that you can do use cases or CRC. I'm just going to go with the default at this point. And at this point you get this. This is a clickable field. You can change this from new model to something more appropriate. I'm going to call it person model because I started with person over there. And this gives me my model. Now you notice that everything's empty. I don't have any classes yet. If I right click to get the context menu, I can start creating either new submodels if I have a more complex design, or straight off I can create a class. So let's create a class. I've already got the person class in the system. I'm going to create an identical one here in the modeling tool. And I'm going to also right click and say I want some new attributes. So I want to give it an ID, say, and we'll give it one more. Let's say new attribute phone. So we'll give it another one there. I can also do things like this. I can select ID and open this, and I can give it some definition here. So I can say, well, normally I want my ID, and I'll scroll up a bit, to be an identity set. Well, it's not what I wanted. So let's click integer, and I can say apply and hit OK. And likewise, I want to take phone, and let's say I want to make that a string, because I'm going to have some kind of UI at some point that will format this properly for me. In the interim, I'll just say OK. Now at this point, I've been working along, I've got a model, I've got some attributes for a class in my model, and I've got this code sitting over here in the browser. I'd like to synchronize the two. Well, if I go to the Tools menu, you notice there's Synchronize Model and Synchronize Implementation. First, we're going to synchronize the model. What that will do is it'll go out and it'll search the system and find I've got a match on the name basis, and if I didn't, I could go ahead and filter this and pick the class that I want to synchronize it to. I'll just go with the default, so I'm going to synchronize these two. And it's going to give me a warning. The warning being that in the system, over here in the class, I didn't give this guy any attributes, and I've given some with the model. So it's warning me, just in case I didn't want to go further, that there's a little difference. I'm going to say, fine, I know this was my intention. Now I haven't made any changes over on the class side in the system yet. I've just synchronized these two. If I want to actually synchronize the implementations, there's this menu, Synchronize Implementation. And again, it's going to say, well, it's going to stuff it into person package. It's going to put it in the namespace here. I'm not going to have to fill anything in because it's already picked everything up. I'm going to hit synchronize. Save is not something I normally need to do. This is kind of a holdover from the way ObjectStudio used to work. Before you had a store in ObjectStudio and you stuck everything out in external files and used an external version control system, this would export that way. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to go with synchronize. It's also going to give me the same warning again because it is now going to synchronize the two so that everything lines up, and it's going to tell me I'm going to have to make changes. Fine, I wanted to make changes. So it's going to go ahead and do that. And at this point, you notice in the browser I got an update. So over here I have this guy here, subclass the way I'd expect. I have some code generated, and notice here it was smart enough to say, well, you told me this was going to be an integer, so it's going to do that. And I've got this method over here, and it's defaulting phone to string new. So it set some stuff up based on what I coded. Now let's go ahead and say I want to write some new code on this side. So I'm going to say a simple testing method. Does this guy have a phone? Answer, phone, not nil. So I'll go ahead and accept that, Control S to compile it. I've worked this guy in the browser now. What about over here in my model? Well, it turns out that since I synchronized the two, notice it's already there. If I right click on this and hit open, I can go ahead and take a look at the code editor here, and I could also add additional information. So I could give it some additional topic information, some documentation if I'd like that to be there. So if I have a shop standard that says everything needs to be documented according to this kind of thing, which you'll often see in languages that aren't Smalltalk. You can add that to your Smalltalk toolset using this tool. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. So everything is lined up between these two at this point. I can also do some other interesting things here. As I said before, with the design, I'm in Design Explorer. I could have been using CRC or use case. I can also do some other things. I can add a new object diagram. So let's say I want to say person, let's make that capital S, person diagram. And you notice this is going to come in here. I've got this thing empty because there's nothing in it at this point. Notice it is a submodel of my main person model. Let's take person and drag it in there. And having done that, if I go back over here, now notice that it's updated this. So I've got an object diagram. And at this point, if I had a business person who, not really a developer, might be interested in working with this, they know data, they know database models, they know models like this, they could start working within this tool set to build stuff for me and then synchronize it back and give me the stubs over here in my Smalltalk model, and the two of us could collaborate, each exercising the strengths and knowledge we have in a way that made sense. So I can work that way back and forth between these two tools and keep everything in sync. So it's kind of a basic overview of the modeling tool. There's a lot more features to this thing. I would strongly encourage you to read the documentation and explore the tool yourself, because we've just scratched the surface. But I've given you a basic idea of how to get started, how to work back and forth between code and model, and get something out there that you can work with. So that's about it for today. Until next time, have fun with Syncom Smalltalk.